Nero, Part 4 of the Lives of the 12 Caesars by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Philippa. The Lives of the 12 Caesars by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, translated by Alexander Thompson and edited by T. Forrester. Nero, Part 4, paragraphs 41 to 57. Being roused at last by numerous proclamations of Vindex, treating him with reproaches and contempt, he in a letter to the Senate exhorted them to avenge his wrongs and those of the Republic, desiring them to excuse his not appearing in the Senate house, because he had got cold. But nothing so much galled him as to find himself railed at as a pitiful harper, and instead of Nero, styled Aenobarbus, which being his family name, since he was upbraided with it, he declared that he would resume it and lay aside the name he had taken by adoption. Passing by the other accusations as wholly groundless, he earnestly refuted that of his want of skill in an art upon which he had bestowed so much pains, and in which he had arrived at such perfection, asking frequently those about him if they knew any one who was a more accomplished musician. But being alarmed by messengers after messengers of ill news from Gaul, he returned in great consternation to Rome. On the road his mind was somewhat relieved by observing the frivolous omen of a Gaulish soldier defeated and dragged by the hair by a Roman knight, which was sculptured on a monument, so that he leapt for joy and adored the heavens. Even then he made no appeal either to the Senate or people, but calling together some of the leading men at his own house, he held a hasty consultation upon the present state of affairs, and then, during the remainder of the day, carried them about with him to view some musical instruments of a new invention, which were played by water, exhibiting all the parts and discoursing upon the principles and difficulties of the contrivance, which, he told them, he intended to produce in the theatre, if Vindex would give him leave. Soon afterwards he received intelligence that Galba and the Spaniards had declared against him, upon which he fainted, and losing his reason lay a long time speechless, apparently dead. As soon as recovered from this state of stupefaction, he tore his clothes, beat his head, crying out, "It is all over with me." His nurse endeavouring to comfort him, and telling him that the like things had happened to other princes before him, he replied, "I am beyond all example wretched, for I have lost an empire whilst I am still living." He nevertheless abated nothing of his luxury and inattention to business. Nay, on the arrival of good news from the provinces, he, at a sumptuous entertainment, sung with an air of merriment some jovial verses upon the leaders of the revolt, which were made public, and accompanied them with suitable gestures. Being carried privately to the theatre, he sent word to an actor, who was applauded by the spectators, that he had it all his own way, now that he himself did not appear on the stage. At the first breaking out of these troubles, it is believed that he had formed many designs of a monstrous nature, although conformable enough to his natural disposition. These were to send new governors and commanders to the provinces and the armies, and employ assassins to butcher all the former governors and commanders, as men unanimously engaged in a conspiracy against him, to massacre the exiles in every quarter, and all the Gaulish population in Rome, the former lest they should join the insurrection, the latter as privy to the designs of their countrymen and ready to support them; to abandon Gaul itself, to be wasted and plundered by his armies; to poison the whole senate at a feast; to fire the city and then let loose the wild beasts upon the people, in order to impede their stopping the progress of the flames. But being deterred from the execution of these designs, not so much by remorse of conscience as by despair of being able to effect them, and judging an expedition into Gaul necessary, he removed the consuls from their office before the time of its expiration was arrived, and in their room assumed the consulship himself, without a colleague, as if the fates had decreed that Gaul should not be conquered but by a consul. Upon assuming the fasces, after an entertainment at the palace, as he walked out of the room leaning on the arms of some of his friends, he declared that as soon as he arrived in the province, he would make his appearance amongst the troops, unarmed, and do nothing but weep; and that after he had brought the mutineers to repentance, he would the next day, in the public rejoicings, sing songs of triumph, which he must now, without loss of time, apply himself to compose. In preparing for this expedition, his first care was to provide carriages for his musical instruments, and machinery to be used upon the stage; to have the hair of the concubines he carried with him dressed in the fashion of men, and to supply them with battle axes and Amazonian bucklers. He summoned the city tribes to enlist, but no qualified persons appearing, he ordered all masters to send a certain number of slaves, the best they had, not excepting their stewards and secretaries. He commanded the several orders of the people to bring in a fixed proportion of their estates, as they stood in the censors' books; all tenants of houses and mansions to pay 1 year's rent forthwith into the exchequer, and with unheard of strictness would receive only new coin of the purest silver and the finest gold, insomuch that most people refused to pay, crying out unanimously that he ought to squeeze the informers, and oblige them to surrender their gains. The general odium in which he was held received an increase by the great scarcity of corn, and an occurrence connected with it. For, as it happened just at that time, there arrived from Alexandria a ship, which was said to be freighted with dust for the wrestlers belonging to the emperor. This so much inflamed the public rage, that he was treated with the utmost abuse and scurrility. Upon the top of one of his statues was placed the figure of a chariot, with a Greek inscription, that now indeed he had a race to run, let him be gone. A little bag was tied about another, with a ticket containing these words: "What could I do? Truly thou hast merited the sack." Some person likewise wrote on the pillars in the Forum, that he had even woke the cocks with his singing; and many in the night time, pretending to find fault with their servants, frequently called for a vindex. He was also terrified with manifest warnings, both old and new, arising from dreams, auspices, and omens. He had never been used to dream before the murder of his mother. After that event, he fancied in his sleep that he was steering a ship, and that the rudder was forced from him; that he was dragged by his wife Octavia into a prodigiously dark place, and was at one time covered over with a vast swarm of winged ants, and at another surrounded by the national images which were set up near Pompey's theatre, and hindered from advancing farther; that a Spanish jennet he was fond of had his hinder parts so changed as to resemble those of an ape, and having his head only left unaltered, neighed very harmoniously. The doors of the mausoleum of Augustus flying open of themselves, there issued from it a voice calling on him by name. The Lares, being adorned with fresh garlands on the calends, the 1st of January, fell down during the preparations for sacrificing to them. While he was taking the omens, Sporus presented him with a ring, the stone of which had carved upon it the rape of Proserpine. When a great multitude of the several orders was assembled to attend at the solemnity of making vows to the gods, it was a long time before the keys of the Capitol could be found; and when, in a speech of his to the Senate against Vindex, these words were read, that the miscreants should be punished, and soon make the end they merited, they all cried out, "You will do it, Augustus." It was likewise remarked that the last tragic piece which he sung was Oedipus in exile, and that he fell as he was repeating this verse: "Tane manoge singamos meter pater." Wife, mother, father, force me to my end. Meanwhile, on the arrival of the news that the rest of the armies had declared against him, he tore to pieces the letters which were delivered to him at dinner, overthrew the table, and dashed with violence against the ground 2 favourite cups, which he called Homer's, because some of that poet's verses were cut upon them. Then, taking from Locusta a dose of poison, which he put up in a golden box, he went into the Servilian gardens, and thence dispatching a trusty freedman to Ostia, with orders to make ready a fleet, he endeavoured to prevail with some tribunes and centurions of the Praetorian guards to attend him in his flight; but part of them showing no great inclination to comply, others absolutely refusing, and one of them crying out aloud, "Usque adeone mori miserum est?" Say, is it then so sad a thing to die? He was in great perplexity whether he should submit himself to Galba, or apply to the Parthians for protection, or else appear before the people dressed in mourning, and upon the rostra in the most piteous manner beg pardon for his past misdemeanours, and, if he could not prevail, request of them to grant him at least the government of Egypt. A speech to this purpose was afterwards found in his writing case. but it is conjectured that he durst not venture upon this project, for fear of being torn to